Hi, I'm Debbie Frankel, and I'm here talking about resources and looking at resources as ways of being able to provide psychoeducational tools. And we usually think of resources as the request that I see that we get the most is from clinicians and people working with grievers is there a book? And there's lots of books. In fact, actually, that whole entire bookshelf is nothing but grief-related books. However, there are so many other resources, including next to books as well. But I wanted to talk about when you're going to be offering a resource, I want you to take a look at we got to consider timing. Somebody who has just experienced the death of a loved one very, very, very recently. They're going to have a really, really hard time concentrating. They're going to have a hard time, paying attention. I'm not going to give them a book. I'm not even going to give them sometimes even a chapter. I might give them smaller handouts in order to give them some, start some psychoeducation about grief, about symptoms that they're going through, about things that people say around them that are helpful and not so helpful. But we got to take a look at the timing, which also goes with the client readiness, where some clients, will say right away, is there anything that I can read? Is there anything I can do or watch? Okay. Clients' needs. Also take a look at the volume of material given. Again, rarely will I recommend an entire book. I may say you might want to get this book and only read, just start with chapter 1 or chapter 7 or this excerpt right here. It's not unusual for me to have a piece that I read from a book or from some cards or from some handouts or an article. Okay? And then really what's really, really important is your familiarity with the resource. If you say, well, I heard this is a good book. I don't know, you might want to get this or this or this. Take some time to research the resource. And here's what I love about Facebook is that I see a lot of people on private practice grief group asking, hey, what do you think about this? What do you know about that? People jumping in with their opinions about this approach or that approach, which is great. So here's some questions that I ask. In fact, actually, I'm going to share my screen so you can see the questions that I am referring to. And here you go. Okay, so here's my screen, and so I want to ask. I want to think about who's the resource for. Okay, what's the nature of the relationship? And I'm going to talk mostly in terms of death of a loved one. Certainly, we know it's absolutely not the only loss, but I'm going to stick to mostly that while I'm talking. So you think about what's the nature of the loss? Was this somebody that was very close to them? Was there a lot of conflict in the relationship? Were they distant? Were they estranged? Okay, that's kind of a really, really tricky grief for people. Also, partner loss, spouse loss. Okay, and then the partner or spouse loss, was that due to death? Is it due to dementia? How about divorce? Because grief is involved in all of that. Is it parent loss? And then for parent loss, is it is the resource for a child? Is it for a teen, an adult, for the parent of the child or teen, or even the parent of an adult child? Okay. Is it sibling loss? This family member or close or friend loss. Is it child loss? And if it's child loss, is it pregnancy, infant loss? Finding out the age of the child who died will be able to help you look for or ask for resources that I'm probably not going to I'm not going to refer or give a resource for a client who's suffered pregnancy loss. I'm not going to give them resource of something that's related to adult child. Obviously, that's a really, really obvious one. So, but take a look at getting more information of the nature of the loss. I'm including pet loss too. What are the circumstances of the loss? Is it a sudden death, which has a different reverberation? And is that related to suicide or substance abuse death? How about violent death? And in my notes, I have just a smattering because I have a lot of resources. I didn't want to overwhelm you. Like violent death, there's Murder Survivors Handbook. I think that one. Resources like this really actually are absolutely, completely so invaluable, because even within each chapter, there's resources, suggestions within each chapter of this book, which is a good resourceful book. Okay. Illness. What was it? If it was sudden death, was it due to a heart attack, an aneurysm? Okay. How about loss of health or terminal illness? How about dementia? I love Jill Johnson Young's book, The Rebellious Widow, because one of her wives had died from Lewy body dementia, and so that's just, and she does a great. I just love Jill's materials. Was it due to cancer? COVID, okay, and I'm still collecting. I'm collecting resources on COVID related grief and death. Stroke. A client of mine here and there have had strokes. Jill Bolte-Taylor, who's just an absolute amazing neuroscientist, who had a stroke on her left side of her brain. This is a TED Talk. And so, think about, like, again, resources that aren't only related to death, okay? Or books, that is. Then I also want to listen for when was the loss? Was this recent? Was it within the last 12 to 24 months? And I asked that because grief groups usually, I know the grief groups that we have around here that I refer out to, they have a limit usually that the loss, the death has to have occurred between 12 and sometimes 18 months beforehand. Is it longer than 2 years? Is it longer than 2 years? Okay, so then I'm gonna have different resources for that. When was the loss? Is it? Oh, actually, this was supposed to be. No, this is supposed to be pet loss. And so for pet loss, is the person or family dealing with this before the death or after the death? If it's before the death, let's see, where is that book? Oh, another one of Jill Johnson Young's books, which is My Pet is Sick, which is an awesome resource because of all the information that Jill gives as far as teaching about what is happening before the pet dies, okay? And support. Or is it pet loss after the death? This one, it's not only related to pet loss. This is actually my friend Randy Perman Wolfson. I just love Randy. And Eddie's Brave Journey is another great book that can apply to actually pet loss, human loss, okay? Friend loss, okay? How about culture and ethnicity that you want to take into account? I'm reading this book of Grieving While Black, which is an awesome book. Okay. How about taking a look, thinking about language, customs, rituals. Actually, one of our associates just actually shared this book that I had not heard about, which is called The Crafting of Grief. That's a wonderful, wonderful book. How about you want to take into account sexual orientations? There's a book of lesbian widows, invisible grief. Take into account gender identity, trans community, sex characteristics. So there's so many different factors that we want to take into account when we're looking at sharing resources. So again, I had said the most often requested resource is a book. But then I'm also thinking, well, what type of book? Is it an informational book? Is it self-help? Is it for the griever? Is it for the parent to support their child? Is it for the child or teen? Is it for the people supporting the griever? Is it maybe an inspirational book that might be helpful, that has stories or poems, writings? Actually, John Polo has his book, Widowed, and he has a piece in there that's called Why We Talk About Them. It's one of my favorite pieces. And it's one page, and I actually will frequently read that with clients, usually kind of at some point, usually in the first few weeks that I start working with them. Songs, okay? Sharing, is it professional? Is it for a resource for a professional? You have a clinician book or courses, okay? So here's some other thoughts of different kinds of resources. How about podcasts? Here's my favorite podcast in the last couple of weeks is Andrew Huberman Lab. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist up in Stanford, and he has a podcast that is just awesome. And I just went through. It's 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours, and I have actually looked through. I've looked at that podcast, I think 3 times now. So I shared a 7-minute clip with a client just recently, which was talking about internal mapping, and that was great. And so I shared that during session, and a client had asked. We were talking about, did he want to see more of it? And so I was able to share that. Okay. Have you thought about videos? Okay. Or movies? Actually, I last summer had recommended that a family watch Ted Lasso. One of the people in the family is a teen girl on a soccer team, and that led to great conversations. Okay, so again, doesn't always have to be a book. Articles. I love the articles written by Eleanor and Lisa over at whatsyourgrief.com. It's one of my favorite resources that I have been sharing for years and years and years. I don't even know how many articles that they have on there, but they are wonderful. You might want to think about games. Okay, I love sentence completion cards. I tell my students at Pepperdine, I really like props. Props help, so to speak. Here's one of my favorites. It's by a company called Bright Spots, and it's called the Memory Garden. And I usually say to kids, okay, here, I want you to pick 5 cards. And I pick 5 cards too. I believe when somebody dies, 5 words that describe the person who died are: as time passes, since the person died, and it's still hard for me too. So those are, so start thinking about, other types of resources to include with books. There's cards like empowering cards. My friend Beth Kelly, who's such a wonderfully creative woman, created points of view oracle cards, and those are really cool. I've shared courses with clients that you have to take a look at timing, readiness. Linda Ty's sensory embodiment and regulation strategies is an awesome 12-week course that anybody can take. What's your griefs? Exploring grief through photography. They have courses on their website, what'syourgrief.com. And so this one is on photography, or grief through photography. Think about groups online. I found a great bereavement group for spouse loss for a client here in California. My client is really doing really, really well in the group. There's another, there's Brianna over at hamzahealingspace.com who runs awesome groups. Like one of her groups is End of a Relationship Support Group. So be thinking about that stuff. In-person groups are now starting to come back more. Some examples are a child loss support group. A common one is Compassionate Friends. And, I listen to some people who have found that it's a peer supported. It is not therapist supported, it's peer supported. And there are some pros to it, and some people who have really pointed out that there are some cons to it. Okay. So, and they have most of the local groups and national chapters have online resources as well. And then I also say, take a look at social media, okay? Because that's how you found me, right? Is through social media. Social media online groups can be really beneficial. However, we know that social media also has its fill of misunderstandings, rantings, and lunatics. So please advise your client to use caution when sharing any personal information about themselves. There are so many Facebook private groups that people can join that can help them not feel so alone. Okay. So before I, wrap up, is that I want to go over the benefits. And for those of you who have signed up, I assume when you signed up that I've got your email address, and I will send you a copy of this handout that I'm reading from. So benefits of resources is that it increases your client's sense of self-efficacy. Okay. Is that they can do, that it helps them feel resourceful. Okay. Increases their capacity to deal with difficulty. It increases their sense of agency. And these are a couple of quotes, is that resources are like assets. The more you have, the better off you are. Okay. I really think that resources absolutely offer hope and confidence. They decrease the client's sense of isolation. That's a really, really, really big one. It provides psychoeducation for your client that enhances your work together. It widens your toolbox and knowledge base. It widens your perspective. It increases, again, hope and inspiration. It decreases pressure on you that you have to provide everything for your client. Okay. Is that you can share resources that they can feel that they can follow up on. Okay. In some aspects, in some ways, you get to be able to support other creators' work. Case in point. I don't have it. I think I lent it out. There was a project called the Grief Deck, which is artists. It was just an absolute awesome project that got put together. And so the Grief Deck, I was really proud of being able to help sponsor that. One of the sponsors. You get to support your colleagues and creators. You get to benefit your relationship with your client. And it encourages your clients to think of you next time they have a client that might benefit from your services. Okay. So, the downside of resources is client may feel misunderstood. We may be rushing, or they may feel pressured. They may not follow up on the resource. They may not be ready. I included ego-driven. I remember somebody many years ago who would only offer the books that the one book that this person had written. That was it. There were no other resources. Everybody else's work was awful, and their book was the only book. So it can be a bit on the ego-driven side. So I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to go back to, let's see. I'm going to go back to, okay. I don't think, there, I'm not sharing anymore. So if this has been helpful, please say so in the comments. Who is the author of Pet is Sick? Is Jill Johnson Young, who's really a wonderful author. She's written several books, but My Pet is Sick by Jill Johnson Young. So thank you. I hope this is helpful, and take good care.